Donald Trump has released the first details, his budget proposal for this year. Bear in mind before we get into the specifics that this is not the budget that is necessarily going to pass. It's almost certainly not the budget that will pass. But here is what he wants. He is, especially because it's not going to necessarily become law, anything put in here is basically a symbol. It is Trump saying what he wants and what he does not want. So we've got a lot here. It's a $4.8 trillion proposal. That includes $2 billion to fund his enhancements to the border wall. So $2 billion additional dollars for this year. So far, they have spent $18 billion on that wall between the US and Mexico.
This time, the enhancement is just that the wall will stay up, right? It won't be blown over by, what's that thing?
They're actually
wind.
Wind, yeah.
They're going to the third little pig, and they're going to see if they can build something to withstand the huff and puff. The huff and puff was powerful against the wall. I mean, this is all, the whole budget. It's all fantasy, right? It's like we're going to spend this much, and then he increases spending based on economic growth that's never happened.
Yeah,
and it's not going to happen. But again, this is a political appeal to his base. That's all it is. Then he can say, hey, I put in this and I wanted to do that and they stopped me from this. And it's all, it's like you said, it's his dream, it's projection. And come on, how much of this did he write?
Oh, that's a good point. He liked some of it, but he didn't write it. And so again, like we've said multiple times, you can't necessarily be sure that any of these numbers are going to end up actually looking like this. But the Democrats gave him billions for his wall last year, and they supported the military budget just a few months ago. So some of it could make it through all the way.
I don't know why we're still paying taxes. Like, what? Like this is ridiculous. Like, it is ridiculous. Like, will someone come after me? Like, listen, I'm not mafia. I'd like to think someone would come after me, though, that I'd be important enough if I evaded my taxes, someone eventually would. One can dream. But I honestly don't know why we are. I mean, again, you're saying the complicity of the Democrats and all this. Every time I think what happens with Democrats is that you say there's going to be militarization, like border security. You're just going to call it security. And then eventually that gets siphoned off into building more of this dumb wall. I mean, he's already siphoned off money from FEMA. He's siphoned off money from the military. I don't understand why we are cooperating anymore. But of course, I can't say that because I'll be called, like uncivil and not bipartisan.
No, if you were rich enough, you wouldn't have to pay taxes. So if you don't want to pay taxes, step up your game. Step up your game.
It's Oklahoma City.
If you could bring home a couple of billion a year, then you wouldn't be bothered paying taxes. The thing about the military budget, there's two things I look at this is one, like the veterans portion of the budget. I'm fine with that. The only problem is exactly what you said. It doesn't get to them. See, if it got to them, if it got to improving the veterans hospital budget, if it got to improving their other benefits and stuff like that, they deserve it. And I'd be okay with that. The problem with taxes and the budget is the money never gets to where they say it's going to go. If the money was actually used to rebuild infrastructure, for example, and you actually saw the roads were getting smoother or bridges weren't falling down, then people be like, oh, okay, I don't mind paying taxes. Hey, wait, there's a new school that got built. So, the thing about the military money is it's political suicide to say no to the military budget. That's the thing. Remember, everyone in Congress, everyone in the Senate, their only job is getting reelected, right? So once they're in, their whole thing is, I got to keep my job. And it's the first thing that will be used against you. You joke about being uncivil and un-American. If you're in Congress and you vote to cut 1 penny from the military budget, you are obviously in league with the terrorists.
You're
right. You have to be.
Totally.
So that I don't know what the solution is. This can't keep going. It's impossible to sustain this. What happens is every 20 years, at 30, the economy crashes, right? Now listen, I'll be honest. I'm an old guy. I've had a good run. You, not so good. But me, I figure by the next crash, I'm gone anyway. So, what the hell?
Just take advantage of it now.
No, you're in for a rough ride. And in this budget, the military is getting like $750 billion. because we're fighting Mars or something. No, just a regular, like, run-of-the-mill budget, $750 billion. And that's not even the full budget. There's all sorts of contingencies and overseas, all that. And look, I think we could easily cut the budget in half, combined with some other changes to our foreign policy, and be perfectly fine. And I know, like you say, they'll say you're not supportive of the military. That's BS. I'm way more supportive. I want really well-paid soldiers with full benefits who are really far away from IEDs and bullets and bombs and rockets because they're here and they're well-paid. That's what I actually want. And I agree, people react negatively to any sort of talk about cutting the military budget, and that's why some people have been trying to shift the narrative about that for a very long time, but it's on us to do that. We have to redouble our efforts in the same way that we've been trying to get people to pay attention to the climate crisis for years and years and years, sometimes for some people decades. We have to do the same thing because we are wasting so much money that could go to so many other things.
Absolutely. I mean, and I don't even know where the money for our allies who end up killing and disappearing journalists goes to. Like, is that in this military budget? Is that in the State Department budget? I'm not sure. I mean, you talk about terrorists, but it's like, as long as it's a state sanctioned, act, there's no terrorism there. And what Saudi Arabia does or what Israel does, that's totally fine, right? We can't criticize that, or else we're definitely un-American, etc. This budget, though, I think is brilliant because it really is the continuation of like Bannon's fan fiction between Charles Dickens and Ayn Rand, that he keeps on writing. And like he said it, they're about destroying the state. They want to dismantle the state. And Alonzo's point with like, you don't see the roads fixed, we don't put money into infrastructure. It's this self-fulfilling prophecy because if you don't see it being fixed, you're like, why do I pay taxes anyway? Oh yeah, the state's just gouging me. Everything's run down. It's like, it's all deliberate. And so, yeah, we are living in that nightmare fan fiction right now.
Yeah. And to address your point with the military budget, transparency is part of it because within this budget is just like pay for the troops, for the soldiers, and housing. Like, show us how much money is being spent on that.
Yeah.
And we're okay with that.
Let's audit it.
And then maybe we'll cut down on the budget to battle Mars.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe that part, maybe Space Force. They've got an emblem now. We'll get them T-shirts and then we'll just stop, And even, again, I used to work in this industry, and some of these technological advances made by the military do come back to civilian life. Everything in your car was developed in aircraft years ago. Some of it makes sense and some of it's ridiculous, but they won't break it down. The other thing is, and this is where Trump's base and what you talked about with Bannon is so amazing. They don't even try to lie anymore. You know what I mean? It's just, they just say, we're not cutting Medicaid as they're cutting Medicaid. And their base is sitting there like, well, at least they're not cutting Medicaid. Stupid, it's in here. They're cutting Medicaid, so they can't do any wrong. Getting back to what you were saying, they can't, with their base, no matter what they say, we'll play along, we'll believe it.
Yeah, even when the claim that they're not going to cut it comes 48 hours before the budget that cuts it. Like, it seems like that would be an easy connection to make. And really fast, I just want to run through a couple of the other big changes, mainly in the area of cuts, because you talked about what about our allies? Well, military allies probably going to be fine. But if you don't have a good military, if you're in trouble, well, you're screwed, because the Trump budget calls for a 22% cut to the State Department and the US Agency for International Development's budget. So effectively, overall, for foreign aid, it is a 21% cut. And generally, when you ask a lot of Americans about should foreign aid be cut, they say yes. When you ask them what percentage of the federal budget goes to foreign aid, they say 20 to 30%. It's a tiny little fraction of that, but they think we're just handing hundreds of billions of dollars every single year, which
that
of course,
the National Endowment for the Arts.
That's 50%.
That's really what's gouging our pockets.
CATS eats up most of the federal budget, I think.
Absolutely.
Can you imagine if they were publicly funded? We wouldn't have a country anymore.
You'd think with that much money they could do the hands. So really fast, I want to give you just a preview, an idea of what a 21% cut to our foreign aid might produce. So Trump last April froze $450 million in support to El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. That took away needed direct support for people living in extreme poverty and danger in those nations, leading them to seek better opportunities in the United States. In 2018, for example, more than 116,000 Guatemalans crossed over the southern US border, more than any nation except Mexico. Now, the idea that you take away aid for these places that are in a really rough state, things get worse, so they decide to come here. The connection between that and them coming here is not lost on the people who made this budget, because they are putting more money into the wall. They are putting more money into the Department of Homeland Security.
Yeah.
So they get what pain and suffering this is going to produce.
Yeah.
They just don't care.
Yeah, it's the self-fulfilling prophecy once again. You cut off the aid to these countries in need, you force people to flee, and then you blame them for their own destitution. And listen, I think we don't talk about this enough, but I think that the refugee crisis and the migrant crisis, I'm gonna call it a crisis, is this hemisphere's version of the Syrian refugee crisis. And it's gonna require, like, I'm not saying it's gonna be a simple fix, but it's going to require a multinational solution that crosses borders, right? That has to do with both trade and safety. Obviously, it has a lot to do with us not, because I'm sure we're not cutting, I don't know how much military aid we're cutting. We might be cutting humanitarian aid, but our military aid might be continuing to funnel through there. But anyway, the point being is that we need to solve this. We need to fix this. I think no American wants to say that Salvadorans or Guatemalans should have to leave their country, If they need to seek asylum, I believe that they should be able to seek asylum in the States. But like, I don't want to create the conditions for them to have to leave in the first place, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, it's back to the cruelty. It's like, if cruelty is your aim, if an ethno-nationalist, extremist agenda is your aim, this is how you go about doing it.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Demon, listen, we could get a lot of that humanitarian aid. Let's just cut out the golf trips to Mar-a-Lago. You know, that's 1/3 of the money that we're spending on humanitarian aid around where, I mean, what you said about the self-fulfilling prophecy, sure. Take away their money, take away their food, take away their housing, take away any incentive, and they're gonna wanna come to a country where they feel they have a better opportunity.
Yeah.
But there's no profit in building opportunity in their country. That's not sexy.
Right.
What's sexy is, what gets you votes is saying, oh, look, here's another march. We got to build the wall. You ever notice the refugee march, the
caravans?
The caravans only happen a month before an election.
Yeah, that's weird.
The only time there's a caravan a month, and then the day after an election, all right, break it up, go home. It's like they're Hollywood extras. It's like we're gonna listen. We're gonna need.
It's Trump. They might be.
We're gonna need 50,000 extras to march toward the border. All right, that's a wrap. Everybody go home. Pick up your voucher.
It's the most see-through every single time. Really fast. Let's go through a couple more cuts, just so you know. Now, we pointed out. They say we're not cutting Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, even though he has already said that he will in an interview. Then he tweeted that he wouldn't. They're cutting $4.4 trillion over a decade, $130 billion effectively in cuts over prescription drug prices through Medicare, 292 through safety net cuts, including things having to do with work requirements for Medicaid and SNAP, and also $70 billion cut through limiting eligibility for federal disability benefits. So, politicians are often really dishonest. They hide what they want to do. So I would like to give credit to Donald Trump and the Republicans heading into their election, saying, no, we're gonna cut trillions from the most popular programs in the history of American governance. So good job there. Really fast, let's also note, I believe that Greta has had an effect. The EPA is gonna receive a 26% cut, so that's impressive. HUD is gonna have a 15% cut, and you know what? They're even cutting the Centers for Disease Control by 9% as the coronavirus is all over the headlines. It isn't actually, significant in that way in terms of setting the agenda for the CDC, but they don't care. No, all these things, the EPA, HUD, CDC, that doesn't benefit billionaires. It benefits dumb schmucks like us.
Well, again, their base doesn't believe that. I mean, you have a base that votes against its own best interest, right? So when you have people who are voting to eliminate the EPA, when the mine is right next to them, when the toxic dump is right next to them, or whatever, then why not do it? Mm-hmm. I mean, from the point of, if you're the rich Republican businessman to whom these regulations cost money, are you kidding? Do you know how they're probably amazed? They're like, really? They're gonna just let us dump this sludge?
Yeah.
Well, I'll be damned. Yeah. Well, let's get the sludge dumping, right? I mean, it's fascinating, but it's true. You have and this is a locked-in base that don't bother us with the facts or anything else. Our kids getting sick, the hospitals now 100 miles away, whatever. any of that, all you do is say, well, that was a Democratic Congress. They're like, yeah. And so it's easy. It's
and
too
that's
easy.
the thing is that this stuff gets lost in the budget. Yes, this is arguably the most unsexy topic ever, and no one's gonna go back and be like, I wonder why the coronavirus broke out in late 2020 throughout the country. Oh, it's because, we gutted the CDC or, so I think we need a plan to put very hot actors to work in explaining the national budget, like a la Margot Robbie in the bathtub in the movie that I'm forgetting.
About the housing crash.
Yeah, I was gonna say Moneyball, but it's the same director as Moneyball. The point is we need more, if the Oscars could just explain the budget as they're walking on the red carpet. Is that too much?